I'll
Hello,
let
Rick.
you.
Thank you so much for being there.
My pleasure, Benjamin. Is that how I say it, Benjamin? You know,
Absolutely.
I've lived in France 18 years and I've really never learned French.
But, but,
Um,
but did you learn Italian?
Not that much either. I mean, just the bare necessities. I think everybody around me just needed to speak English. As soon as I got here, they needed to speak English just so there would be no mistakes. And so as a result, I was always so protected with language in a way that I just never learned. And I never really assimilated in Paris that much. I mean, I don't, it's, I didn't have to go out and deal with my electric bill or with I don't know, just engage that much. So I just never really learned. But it just gives me another level of privacy that I don't mind at all.
No, I like to be in countries where I can't understand the word. Because,
Uh, yeah, I'm not that spontaneous or adventurous. So I don't mind not knowing as long as I have a lot of people around me who do.
sure, that's luxury.
Yeah, that really is luxury. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, my first question would be about this year, this strange year, 2020. At the end of quarantine, I met a friend of mine who is 65 years old, and he told me something really strange and funny. He said, it's the first time that something really happens in my whole life. That, and I think that many people could have said something like that. That it's the first time that history is really at their door, and not in books. So I wanted to know how you have felt and how you think. What do you think about this strange period we have just been through?
I'm surprised it hasn't happened before. There is so much conflict, and life is so fragile. This generation has never really had to live through a war. And your friend at 65, he just missed the war. So people have lived with deprivation and disaster before, and uh, I, in a way, I was kind of thinking, oh, at last something happened because it was. I mean, it's not like I thought it was a good idea, but I mean, I just thought we've been so lucky to have avoided such discomfort. We're so lucky to have avoided it for this long, especially when you see on the internet how much how much aggression there is, and to live in a planet that has more and more people that are aggressive or that can become aggressive so easily. It's a miracle that we have gotten by without some kind of terrible threat. Um, and as I was pretty privileged in where I am in Paris, and that I was able to get through quarantine in a fair amount of comfort. Um, but I was very conscious of those who weren't, and the stresses and the traumas that people were going through. So but I had a very comfortable house in the middle of Paris with a nice garden, so I was able to be outside and spend a lot of time. And I was thinking, you know, this is the time for science. This is science's moment to be really under a lot of pressure. And I don't have a lot to say. I just need to stay out of the way and prepare for the time when it comes for my contribution. And I do believe that fashion is a cultural contribution. It is a part of the general cultural aesthetics of the period, which are tremendously important. And that's what is left when a civilization that is what defines a civilization for years to come. Um, in a general sense, and my contribution to that is minuscule, but it's all a question of degrees. Everybody contributes what they can and what their strongest suit is. So I spent the quarantine, um, first of all, um, with a lot of gratitude. I mean, I was in a very fortunate, privileged position to be where I was, very fortunate and very grateful for it. But also, I was thinking my job, my role now is to absorb and to study as much as I can so that I'm prepared when it comes for my time to do what I need to do. So I read, I researched I just looked through all of the books that I'd been ordering for years and had in piles that I thought I would get to at some point, on vacation or something. Um, so I absorbed as much as what could feed me aesthetically to prepare for uh, for whatever I needed for what I needed to do. No, it's not that literal. I mean, it's not like I have references that are going to be in this collection specifically, but it was just absorbing as much of what I considered the best aesthetic contributions of the past had been, so that I would be able to try and live up to that when my turn came.
Mm.
So the thing that I came away with was um, a lot of gratitude, especially in the face of threat. Um, um, yeah, that was it. That was mainly my main thing.
Many people said that it was very tough, especially for fashion, because people had to stay at home. So there was this physical distancing thing. It was as if time was stopped. And without time and without a public space, your relationship with the way you're dressed and the relationship with fashion may become very thin and very, very weak. And I heard you say maybe it's time for reset. Maybe it's a good time to rethink all of this. What did you mean by that? And what do you think? And you say
Well,
fashion is relevant. So
yeah, there were a lot of ways to reset. I think a lot of people that I spoke to came away with the sensation of having been able to bond with people that they really care about even more. We were able to have more time for each other, even though it was on FaceTime. There was still, I know for me personally, I had my relationships um, developed in a different way than they ordinarily would have. And it was very satisfying and very fulfilling to really be able to focus that way. And then as far as, we were able to kind of evaluate after this period of gratitude, because I mean, it's not just me. There's a lot of people that will emerge from this with a sense of gratitude for having either survived a threat or gratitude for having had a moment to pause and reflect. Um, because that was amazing to have time to pause and reflect. Um, um, I forget what your question was. Where was I
no, no,
going?
sorry, because it was a long question. It was like for fashion, it was especially tough because
Uh,
because people didn't have to get dressed basically.
People, I mean, yeah, it wasn't the moment for fashion. I mean, it's not always about fashion. So, but yeah, I was thinking like, how do people emerge from crises? I mean, we know that Dior in the 40s after the war created a huge impact, like a psychological impact, with the extravagance of his clothes, of all of the sumptuousness that he was proposing after such a long period of deprivation, which is a very dramatic example of what fashion does, and this and the emotional impact and sensation that fashion can have. Um, I know, I understand that during that time there was a lot of resistance to that and a lot of criticism of it, of being a disrespectful gesture. But it was also a flamboyant, witty gesture. There was something about, there was a wittiness to it. Um, and it wasn't, it wasn't, it was handled pretty well. It was a gesture that was that could have been grotesque and vulgar, but it was, and that's what's great about fashion. A lot of times fashion is interesting, the most interesting, when it borders on grotesque and vulgar. So anyway, it was handled pretty well, and history has a good regard for it. But obviously, this is a very different situation. I mean, that was a different kind of deprivation. This deprivation, I feel like all of us have a little bit of a sense that it was self-imposed, that this kind of disaster was our own fault in a certain way. And you cannot respond to that with sumptuous flamboyance. Um, the other thing that's happened in the last 10 years, responsibility has been a part of the fashion conversation, which it wasn't before. Um, and responsibility, um, people talking about sustainability and ecology and everything in fashion, obviously it has become a marketing gimmick. But that's fine. I mean, if that's a gimmick, that's a good gimmick. It's like a positive gimmick. And even if like 3% of whatever people say they're going to do happens, it's still just the fact that people are even considering responsibility when it comes to fashion. That's a huge step. Um, okay, and then after we have this health crisis, in theory, you would think that people would come out of this a little bit more modest and humbled, but I'm not really sure because now reactions um, and opinions ricochet so fast now because of the communication being so advanced that maybe everybody has already gone through their, like there was 1 week of humility, and then maybe it's already over and people are already ready to party. Yeah, I can't really tell. I haven't figured it out. Um, what I know is that my last collections, my last men's and women's collections for fall, um, I did a lot of extreme shoulders, and shoulders have, they happened in the 40s, and they happened in the 70s, and shoulders are about power most of the time, or they have been. But I was thinking, what was it that I was after? I could, and I realized what I the part the what I was going for was defiance. Because these shoulders were so extreme and bordering on grotesque or bordering on comical, and there was a sense of defiance um, to a bigotry. Um, that is always, I think fundamentally, that has always been my biggest fight against bigotry and intolerance. Because when I started clothes, I wanted to create something that was that mocked um, conventional aesthetic rules, because aesthetic rules can be um, extremely bigoted. They can be so narrow and so cruel um, that my idea, or what I was going for, is proposing alternatives, not as a another set of rules, but as just a proposal that, if you can't be naturally beautiful, or if you can't be this kind of beautiful, I propose this my kind of beautiful for you, which is a different kind of beautiful, which can be it can be modest, but it can be artificial. Um, I'm a big believer in artifice, but artifice doesn't have to be vulgar, and it doesn't have to be false. Um, it can be a sense of formality. It can be gracious. It can be bringing something, um, bringing something generous to the table. Um, so, okay, I got lost again. Where
No,
did
no, we are.
that answer anything?
No, I just wanted to ask you because obviously your work has been extremely consistent over the years. So there is definitely a
Thank you.
silhouette.
That's nice to hear. Thank you.
No, seriously, it's extremely easy to identify a Rick Owens silhouette. So there is no mistake here. But at the same time, I've watched.
You know the fun thing about that, let me I made a point that I wanted it to be inclusive and that I wanted to be able for everybody to say that uh, to suggest that everybody, if they work on themselves, can find a way to be beautiful and alluring. The funny thing is, I made it inclusive, but it became something ultimately that became so recognizable that it became exclusive, and people it became a something that people hesitated to enter because it was so Rick Owens that it starts excluding people, which is ironic
Mm.
because that was kind of the opposite of what I wanted to do. But that's the way life works.
Yeah,
That's just the way life is.
and maybe it's impossible to not to let a style become a discipline and a set of rules because
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, that's my other big lesson in life. Most utopias ultimately corrupt. Um,
sure there is nothing to do about that. So,
Nothing to do. Yeah,
so
I'm a corrupted utopia.
that's a good definition. I mean, um, but I just wanted to come back to your most recent collections, and there is something like an evolution towards more eccentricity. You mentioned the shoulders, but also the deep V necks, the very the high heels, maybe more colors as compared to before. So and you said something like fuck modesty.
Mhm.
So I wanted to know if are you going to continue with that? Are you going to continue to fuck modesty? Or...
I think glamorous and eccentric can go. I think there's a way of doing it. No, I'm still going to do it because um, the more the power I'm able to give to my message, um, and I feel more motivated than ever in a way because if you look at politics and how conservative and um, oppressive in the States, for instance, um, I feel that a lot of the things that I've done have been to try and balance out that sense of bigotry and conservatism. Um, you know, I've done horsefucking videos and piss drinking videos and with musical artists and stuff, but in with kind of um, a joyful tongue-in-cheek humorous attitude. Um, and those doing that kind of thing, I feel is my responsibility to balance out a conservative, oppressive, bigoted, intolerant um, attitude that can be prevalent in the world sometimes that will never go away. It'll always be there. But if there are people like me doing the opposite, the extreme opposite, hopefully it helps maintain a kind of balance and it allows people who are oppressed to find an aesthetic anchor. The way that I, as a young effeminate boy in a very conservative town, found my aesthetic anchor in the flamboyance of people like David Bowie and Lou Reed and those and Divine, you know, all of these transgressive, eccentric spectacular characters that were so anti-conservative, that were violently anti-conservative. Um, I feel that that's what I need to do, and that's what I've been trying to do. But in a gentle, um, soft way, not angry. Well, a little bit angry.
How did you prepare for an online fashion week, and how do you see what did you do, and what are you presenting on that occasion instead of a regular physical show?
Well, what I considered was I did two things. I did both things. I did a video of my fall collection because I was thinking uh, I wasn't going to stress my factory, and um, because they had been away for a while, the factory had been closed for a while. So I was thinking the most modest, tactful thing to do would be to present my fall collection again in a newly edited version. And I thought it was also kind of a great excuse to be able to have a little time to spend more time with the collection and look at it in a different way. Um, Instead of having a more flamboyant, forceful presentation, it was a way to almost do a new version of it that was um, quieter and maybe um, it could be examined a little bit more closely. And um, I hesitate to say the word wearable because I think they're always wearable, but just kind of a quieter interpretation of it. So I did that, but at the same time, I was also preparing the spring collection, and so I did a video of those fittings. When I was in quarantine, I thought the only tactful thing to do for our Instagram was to do home movies. We weren't showing merchandise for sale. I was showing myself um, enjoying quiet moments at home, and and I really enjoyed that. It was really fun to focus on that kind of aesthetic, on a quieter, more gentle aesthetic. So I thought I wanted to extend that for the next couple of presentations, because I thought a flamboyant fashion show at this point is in bad taste or in poor taste. And you know, this is my line of reasoning a month ago. So I did both videos, and as of yesterday, I was planning on showing my fall collection, my fall men's collection, because I was also considering showing fall instead of spring and spring instead of fall going forward, um, to be able to present clothes that people would be able to buy the next month. Um, is that what people call it? What do they call it? See and buy, or
See now
is there?
by now, I think.
Yeah. It was kind of that. I was thinking, you know, this is an opportunity right now to reset our clock and to do things a different way. But you know, what I realized is that, yeah, there's a logic to it. But what I realized is that people have become used to having both things. People have been used to having access to the imagery of all of the new stuff that they won't get for 6 more months, but also access to all of the imagery of what is available right this second. And if I eliminate a preview, um, that doesn't work. Because if I'm showing only a collection that has already been sold 6 months ago, it makes sense, but it also is going to start feeling, um, it'll just feel old, I think.
Yeah,
We're used to seeing something that is fresh out of the oven.
yeah,
Um, and if I don't do that, um, everything becomes a little stale. Um, So I decided this morning, actually, I changed my mind this morning and I decided that we're going to show spring, the spring video that I had prepared. Um, and so I'm going to stick with the old system. I thought, I thought it was a moment that we could do anything. But then I changed my mind and I thought, once you start, you can't go back. You can't go back and take something away. You can't take something away that we've become used to being able to see a preview. And fashion is all about being of the moment. If you start showing presentations of a collection that was sold 6 months ago, it's just a commercial video. There's no risk, there's no comma, there's no because part of the excitement of a fashion show is that it hasn't been bought yet, it hasn't been discovered, it hasn't been examined, um, it hasn't been chosen for you. Everybody has the opportunity to choose for themselves. Afterwards, they choose what the buyers chose. Um, so there's a freshness to showing spring instead of last fall. There just is. So that was my decision today. But it's still a quiet video. It's not a flamboyant video. It's it's a personal, intimate video of me um, um, doing fittings in my studio quietly alone. Um,
Mm. So it's a kind of
uh,
introspection, if I may say.
it is introspect. Well, it's intimate and it's I don't know. I kind of felt like there was a modesty to it that I liked. It was, and it also an authenticity. I mean, this is really how I work, and it wasn't a stage thing. This is us working. This is working in the studio. But then I saw Balmain's couture video,
Yeah.
uh, that last one on the boat.
Yeah.
And I thought that is brilliant. They came up with something really great. It was beautiful. It was graceful. It was beautiful. It wasn't excessive. It wasn't wasteful. Um, I thought it really was perfect. It was, and I think it was archives. I'm not really sure, but I thought it was lovely. It was cheerful. It was beautiful, and um, I thought it was really nice, and I thought it was smart. I thought
Yeah.
it was a really good idea, and it was extravagant in a nice, modest way. Um, yeah, job well done. Bravo.
Okay. And I have one last question. And you mentioned this relationship to time that fashion has, because when you see a show, you see a glimpse of the future. You don't see the
Yeah.
present. You don't see the exact present. You see something that will happen or that may happen if you buy into it in 6 months.
Hmm.
But when I watch your shows, I have a kind of a different feeling. It's not only about a very short-term future. It might
Hmm.
be about the very beginnings or the very end of humanity. A lot
Hmm.
of your shows make me think of that. It's a kind of glimpse of doomsday or the beginnings of the earth. Is it
Hmm.
something that inspire you in some way, like to kind of imagine what humanity was at the very beginning or is going to become at the very end?
No, I think of timelessness a lot. I think of like when I'm thinking of clothes, I'm thinking of all of everything that I'm referencing, and I'm referencing things from maybe the 50s, but I'm also referencing biblical things. I'm referencing archaeological things. I'm trying to paint as big a picture as possible, um, so that in theory that my clothes should look kind of timeless anywhere, just because you can't really um, pin them down to any certain era. They encompass them all. I mean, that sounds terribly lofty of me to say, and I don't mean it in an arrogant way. All I'm saying is that um, I'm trying to look at this huge spectrum, um, instead of just the period that we're living in. How do I think of all of history, all of fashion history, and try and fuse it all together, so that it makes something um, contemporary but also futuristic. Um, yeah, that sounds tricky, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think maybe it's a
And
tricky.
I think also, just like, I think when I present things, I like something with this a little bit of force. I mean, I like music hard. I like entertainment hard. I like something with some power. And when you put that on a runway, it can be interpreted as aggression, um, and and um, and something apocalyptic. I think that's just an easy thing to do. That's an easy thing. That's an easy um, interpretation. Um, and yeah, I suppose that there is a sense of um, people. People often use the term darkness with me, but I think, I don't know if it's darkness or realism, because you can either be completely nihilistic and black, or you can be completely oblivious and Disney pink. So I'm kind of trying to find a balance where I acknowledge both, because if you don't acknowledge the gravitas of life, um, that isn't realistic. And I prefer something a little bit more realistic. So, but there's nothing wrong with Disney pink. I mean, there's fashion as an escapist fantasy is, there's nothing wrong with that. We need all versions of it. My version is just a little bit more um, uh, corrupt utopia.
Yeah, we are very happy with this. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure, Benjamin, and I guess we'll meet in September, maybe.